Hi everybody, I am Gigi Garnet. I'm an associate member of the Garden Club. I have been privileged to get to know over the past 10 or 11 years a very famous garden in England called Folly Farm, which belongs to my sister and brother-in-law. And over the past 15 years or so, they have renovated it with the help of Dan Pearson, who is an internationally known garden designer. Some of you may have known him. And he had some excellent bones to work with. The garden itself is a grade 2 heritage garden, and it represents one of the finest examples of arts and crafts gardens in probably the world. It also represents the pinnacle of partnership between Edwin Lutyens, who was responsible for the hardscape in the house, and the very famous and beloved Gertrude Jekyll, who was his mentor. The garden itself consists of probably 10 garden rooms, a sunken garden, a parterre, a family garden, and a very large walled garden, which houses a kitchen garden. It has a staff of nine full-time gardeners, a head gardener, and an estate manager, all of whom spend every day making it a beautiful place. Jennifer's table is a display that gets done about every, month, every 2 weeks, and refreshed to look beautiful. And I've been told that it's a special place for most of the gardening staff. So I'd like to introduce you to Tim, who is the head gardener. Say hi.
Hello, everyone.
And Simon, who is the estate manager for the property. And I asked them to give some thought to what some of their most favorite things are about Folly Farm, which I hope you will come to learn to love as much as I do from the newsletters that you're going to get to read. So Simon, what makes you the proudest of Folly Farm?
I think, I've had 40 years of being in the horticultural and estate profession. And quite frankly, it's the attention to detail and the fact that every plant that we grow here, we try and grow it to its best. And if a plant isn't performing, it doesn't have a room here. And the expertise of the team is second to none. And that's what I'm proud about.
That's terrific. Tim, can you say something a little bit about your gardening staff and how it's developed?
Yeah, so we're trying to create a healthy kind of garden and a healthy working environment, and the team that we have here now are kind of phenomenal gardeners, and they're very invested in the garden itself. So, and they help to give it a feeling of kind of amazement here at Folly Farm. So they help build that kind of garden. It's an amazing part of the team to be involved with, really.
Yeah, and it's driven with passion, isn't it?
He is driven with passion, yes. That's true. And as we've been walking around the garden, one of the things I heard was that about 300 very special people get to go through this garden in a year. And we were talking about how somebody almost burst into tears when they walked through because it is so unique. So over time, I hope that the Garden Club will get to learn all of the various rooms and what makes them special, and all of the attention to detail that goes into the hedges, that goes into each of the various rooms, and that then gets followed up by cuttings that get taken into flower arrangements that go into the house, and the fruit and the veg that then gets consumed by everybody in the house. This is an incredibly special place, and these are two people who make it that way. So thank you very much, everybody. And everyone is looking forward to learning a lot more about Folly Farm.
And we hope we get to see some of you as well. It would be lovely to have you here in person.
Oh, I think you better be careful. You might. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm here with Ian Clayton, who has worked on and off at Folly Farm since 2008.
Almost the beginning.
First as part of the gardening staff, and then developed his keen interest in the fauna side of
exactly that.
Of
wildlife and conservation.
Wildlife and conservation. And Ian now is responsible for keeping a pretty close track on the wildlife, that the garden and the cultivation of the garden has increased over, I don't know, let's say, what is that, 12 years?
Well, 13, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, it's 13 years. I started when I walked in the door in
So
2008.
I'm going to back up a little bit. This is Ian Clayton. Ian, welcome.
Thank you.
So we're actually walking over to take a look at the beehives. And Ian was telling me, and you can tell the ladies, what the bees do.
So the bees, obviously, in terms of what the bees do, they're important for pollination. They help us with all sorts of things, particularly in the kitchen garden. They're obviously making much use of the meadow area now and the wider estate, which is stuffed with all sorts of native wild plants, flowers, trees. They provide honey for the estate in a good year, and they're just, I think they're an important part of any wildlife consideration, particularly these days, because bees are a species that we believe to be suffering and declining for various reasons. So we try and manage ours as naturally as possible, let the bees do the work, and just make sure they've got what they need when they need it. And obviously in return we get the benefits of their efforts.
So we'll walk a little bit over this way toward the pond. So a lot of this has to do with the more natural part of the garden and the
100%, yes.
less
absolutely.
cultivated.
Yes.
And I know that when I first met you, you were cataloging bees, not just bees, but insects, moths, birds, everybody. And the expectation was once the pond went in, there would be a huge leap forward in the diversity of that. And has that been true?
100%. I mean, when all this started, I walked through the door in 2008 and I just started recording, partly for my own interest, partly because I thought it was a good thing to do as part of what was happening at Folly, and partly because I just believed that it was a really good opportunity to start from nothing. So I walked into a sleepy old garden and a lot of rank grass in the outer areas. What's been done now has dramatically changed the landscape. So we've gone from having just basically grass that was grazed by sheep to having acres of wildflower meadow, native plantings with lots of trees and shrubs that provide nectar and habitat for various things. So I came in and decided I would record birds, butterflies and moths primarily. Time was a little bit of a consideration, so I dabbled in, I did look at damselflies, dragonflies for a while, but essentially what we ended up with was a baseline of data that started more or less as before the project actually got going, and at the point we are now, we're really beginning to see results with things that are coming in, particularly as a result of some of the work we've been doing. So the grassed areas now being meadow, we've started to pick out specific species that relate to the things that we put in. So yellow rattle, for example, we've now got the grass rivulet moth, which is a specialist of yellow rattle, and it relies entirely on yellow rattle for its life cycle.
And wouldn't be here if the
100%.
renovation hadn't taken
because
place in the meadow.
There would be nothing for it to feed on.
And you can see this is all man-made. There was a lot of excavation done of the lowest part of the land, and it got turned into a pond and eventually a stream, which disappears down that way and winds around the house. But we were just talking about how the inclusion of water and this meadow, which unfortunately now has been cut.
Yeah, that is a little unfortunate, a couple of weeks too late.
It's usually beautiful, but there's been an enormous amount of effort to encourage the diversity of wildflowers. When this thing is really going, it is beautiful.
And that's really noticeable now, that the progression of the meadows themselves. We were always told they would take a number of years to develop, and at this point, I think arguably they are at the point they're the best they've ever been. So in terms of diversity and the amount of flower in the meadow.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about trapping the moths, because when I was here before, there were little moth traps around, and you had just found a really remarkable moth. So.
Actually, if I was perfectly honest, the moth trap is probably the bit I enjoy the most. Partly because it's the easiest. So birds and butterflies, you've got to go out and about, which is nice, but something flies past quickly, you can't always get what it is. Moth trap, you stick the trap on, the light comes on, the moths go in, and they're there. You've got a captive trap the next morning. So Folly is really quite interesting. I've been involved with the Berkshire Moth Group because when I started the moths, I knew a bit, but I didn't know much. And you know, you're talking 4,500 or 5,000 species of moth. So even the experts aren't always going to know everything. But certainly starting out the way I did, I was very much in need of help. So their expertise and assistance was invaluable. But what's been interesting is, firstly, the number of species that we've got on the estate as a whole. But the thing that's really quite interesting, we keep turning up things that are relatively rare in the county. So the one that always sticks in my mind personally, and partly because it's so spectacular, but partly because it was such a rarity at the time. In 2011, this time of year, we took what's called a Jersey tiger moth, and at the time I took that, I think there were less than half a dozen records for the whole county.
Wow.
So you know, that to me, that's what I find interesting. We get different bird species that pop up, but nothing of that rarity. Butterflies the same. You've got a relatively set number of species that you expect to find. The moths just keep turning up different things that are, as I say, are relatively rare.
Do you so of the pollinators,
Yeah.
right? It's my understanding that moths are the most productive pollinators there are, which is something people don't really know. Is that right?
People they've got bad press. You know,
Yeah.
you don't see them very often because they fly at night, and there seems to be this sort of, almost people are a bit scared of them because I don't know why, but that seems to be the way it is. But the work that moths do unseen almost is incredibly valuable. Yeah, and partly I think because the sheer numbers of them as well. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, meadow brown butterflies, you might, if you go out and do a survey, you might find 40 or 50. Moth species, if I put the trap out on a summer's evening, you can get anywhere up to 50 species, and you know, it's several hundred individuals.
Yeah,
or
that's
more.
incredible.
And if you trap every night, or in different, you know, you get it across the estate. So the number of the moths and the number of species of moths is considerably more than anything else.
It's astonishing. So how often are you taking inventory of what's here?
As often as I can. So the agreement I made originally was I do a bird survey every week, at least once a week. So that's 52 surveys a year.
Wow.
Butterfly survey, I said I would do a minimum of one a month, but I tend to do as many as I can. And I mean, the moth trap is again minimum of once a month between, I think, March and October, we said. But I mean, last year I ran it. Sometimes running it 5 nights a week.
So you're recording this data for the whole estate. How big is the estate?
30 acres.
It's 30
Yeah,
acres.
24 acres in the outer
Seems
garden.
much bigger.
It does.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? It does.
It
Yeah,
does, yeah.
I mean, it might be a little bit. I don't know whether that includes the little bit by the brook at the bottom,
Yeah.
but it's 30 acres in total.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to wrap up and ask you a question, which is, what is your favorite part of Folly Farm?
That's such a tricky question. Such a tricky question because it's probably changed from when I was first, 10 or 11 years ago.
Yeah, you're one of the people who's been here the absolute longest. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose apart from the girls in the house who came in day one, there's obviously no one else left from that
group,
original because there were only a couple of people here when Patrick the other Ian and Mark the kitchen gardener.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an awfully long time ago. So I would say, and the other thing I would say is my favourite area probably is the landscape. But I'll qualify that by saying the flower parterre in front of the house
is your favourite.
Well, when that's in full flow and everything is, in a good year when everything's doing, it's just spectacular.
Yeah.
But actually, to pick any areas, because the sunken pool garden at the moment is spectacular.
Yeah.
So
that's winning, I have to say.
Yeah, it is. It is. But as with any garden, these things come and go. The sunken pool's better at this time of year. The parterre's better at the start, which is why I think that's such a tricky question.
Yeah.
But Folly for me coming here changed my life. There's no doubt about that. When I got hired here, it genuinely did, and a lot of what I'm doing now I would never ever have done without what I experienced when I was here. So the garden is just it's a very important place, both in terms of what it is, but what it means to me as well, I think.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. I think that's what gardens do for people.
They do. I absolutely.
Particularly people who make their living from them.
Yeah. I think that there's an element of that. I could. When I left and to set up on my own, I would happily have carried on, but the time wasn't right. But when the time was right, the opportunity arose and we picked it up again. So, you know, I'm ever grateful for that. Really, really grateful, because to be a part of this is
Well,
quite
Ian,
remarkable.
thank you so much for doing this, and
Oh,
I'm
pleasure.
also going to like ambush you with congratulations on your upcoming nuptials.
You did, you know.
We've been waiting for a while. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Likewise, thank you.
So we're back because one of the things that happens at Folly Farm all the time is ongoing, constant projects. Some small, like ordering what the colors are going to be next year, and some enormous, like this one that we're standing in front of right now. So, Simon, you want to talk about this?
Well, yeah, I will, because it was a bit of a bugbear. We had lovely houses here full of beautiful displays, and unfortunately we had some issues with the timber rotting, and it was going to cost us a lot of money year on year to maintain. And so after much discussion, we've gone with these, which are powder coated aluminum, and they're going to last our lifetimes without us having to spend vast amounts of money maintaining them. Unfortunately for Tim, it meant that he had to take all of his wonderful displays out and stick them in a polytunnel and maintain for a year whilst this was all going on. This project has been running really for about 18 months, and we're getting to the final stages of it now, and we're all deeply relieved that it's going to be finished before we go into our next winter.
Yeah. Tim, what are you looking forward to putting back?
Oh, I can't wait to get going on it again and displaying all these plants, the wonderful plants, the pelargoniums, the hothouse plants, the tropical plants, and growing tomatoes in a nice favourable environment. So I can't wait, really. It's been a really hard year without these, because we've done all our propagation in a polytunnel and in and out of doors. It's been hard, but yeah, looking forward to getting to grips with the new kind of environment, and I think it'll be really successful.
So how much of what you grow do you propagate?
Quite a lot, and we grow on small plants to bigger plants from plugs and things. So we grow all of our tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers inside, aubergines inside here during the summer. So we're producing them in the polytunnel at the moment, but it's quite it's a bit more trying in the polytunnel, should I say.
Well, I look forward to eating them.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks guys. Hi, I want to introduce you to Anne Williams. She is the author of our newsletter that you're going to read regularly. And Anne, I wonder how did you start writing those newsletters? Did you get told to do it?
Well, it was part of my job, yes. Before I started, there was another member of staff that used to do it, and on his departure, before he left, he explained what was needed to be done, and I read a lot of his work and took it from there. And over the years, I've been doing it now since about 2016. I've sort of developed my own style, I suppose, and it used to be written weekly. It was almost impossible with the workload as well to write a weekly journal, so it became fortnightly, but it's gone up to 2 pages rather than the 1. However, we do illustrate it more, so we use a lot more photos than we used to, and it's something that is a great record as well, of because you can look back year on year and see how far the garden's come in quite a relatively short time.
So I totally agree with you, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to share it, because I think it allows you to see how the garden grows. What do you, because you do sort of cherry pick some of the things, because I know a lot more happens in that too. So what are you specially always happy to write about?
Okay, I like to, it's almost like skimming the sort of cream off the top every week, because you couldn't write about everything. So we always try and have a highlight from each part of the garden, so the wall garden, the landscape and the formal. I always try and put in sort of the major things that are happening, but also some of the new plants we might be putting in, so anything that might be of interest, rather than
something new.
Always something new. There's always an element of almost like the routine as well.
So I also have to ask the question I'm asking everybody Of the garden rooms, which is your favorite garden room?
Oh gosh, well, I suppose it's a bit like asking a mother who her favourite child is. So if I was forced to say which one I'm particularly fond of, it would be the sunken pool garden.
Oh, it looks beautiful
Yeah,
right now too.
yeah,
It's
it does.
amazing. I think it looks better than it's ever looked.
Yeah, and it's there's always something to see in it. I mean,
Yeah.
it has a bit of a rest period in the winter, but from early spring, you know, and the colour change, although it's all hot colours, there's a sort of myriad of colour change as it goes through. Sort of starts with very sort of lime green and yellow in early spring, and then at the moment we've got oranges, also purples, and a bit of sort of sulphur yellow as well. So
It's just astonishing when you come down. I think
Yeah.
it really complements everything.
yeah, it always has a wow factor,
It
and
does.
visitors are always, you know, blown away by it, which
Yeah.
is great for all of us to
Feeling good about
feel
it.
that. Yes.
Well, thank you, Anne, very much, and we
Pleasure.
really look forward to reading
Oh,
that newsletter.
Well, I'll bear your audience in mind from now on as I write
Very
it.
exciting. Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.